Hello everyone, welcome to Transformative Collabs. Today I would like to talk about digital games and how they're being enriched as a medium by artistic practices. I am Tereza Ruller, communication designer, educator and founder of Amsterdam-based studio The Rodina. In our practice, we design situations, participations and interactions, be it physical installations, performances and playgrounds, or video games, environmental websites, experiences and tools for live engagement. Playfulness and imagination, they play a key role in designing such projects. Therefore, I would like to look at selected concepts spanning from play as a cultural phenomena, motivational and educational tool, to digital games as counter-voices to current socio-political situations. So let's dive into games used as emancipatory tools rather than ecstatic escapes. First chapter, from Comenius' Scuola Ludus to video games. During the Great Depression, a Dutch anthropologist, Johan Huizinga, introduced a powerful idea that the condition for culture is a free act of play. But already 280 years before Huizinga's book Homo Ludens, which was released in 1938, elaborated the concept of a natural and fundamental need to play. This revolutionary idea was theorized by Czech-born philosopher, ecological thinker and a school reformer, Jan Amos Comenius. His book, Orbis Pictus, is the first picture book ever made for children. During the 30-year war, a collapsing middle-age European world order restructuralized during a violent 17th century religious war which annihilated almost half of the population, Comenius had to flee re-Catholicized Bohemia to Amsterdam. That became a safe haven for him as a Protestant. In exile, he developed a philosophy of education and revolutionized primary schools by integrating play and playtime and nature exploration. Comenius saw the play as an important didactic strategy. In his words, the joy and play have the power to open the wisdom gardens. Inspired by his emancipatory work, we've recently developed an educational project called Futuropolis, School of Emancipation, for the Czech Ministry of Education, that engages in critical and creative education by strengthening pupils to question and face current world issues with patience, imagination and courage. Comenius would probably have loved the rich abundance of games and gamification today, even though he encouraged competitiveness in play as part of a learning curve. It is important to note that his vision was more one of a peaceful utopia with enlightened citizens rather than what we have now, workers, playbearers, consumers performing their visibility in platform capitalism and competing for multiple jobs in the contractless gig economy. In his Scuola Ludus, Comenius introduced a theory of games and healthy competition in relation to learning. Comenius described 7 criteria of what makes a game a game: movement, spontaneity, collective activity, competition, order and rules, facility and imitation, and purpose, as he called it, the relaxation of the soul. This list was later refined during the boom of digital arcade games of the 80s. Making Learning Fun publication analyzed digital games to find out what it was in the game design that made them engaging and motivating. It introduced the taxonomy of intrinsic motivation, which expanded Comenius's and Huizinga's theories. It concluded that digital games have the ability to motivate players internally by challenge, curiosity, control and choice, and fantasy. The key insight is early digital game theory brings human interaction, empathy, and imagination to the center. In 1991, motivation and education theories were tested as part of the interactive Pong experiment. A large audience became controlling a tennis player collaboratively, just with colorful pedals, without any given rules. Much like the deep mind learned how to play Atari games, only with the pixel data, controls and scores. So the crowd was able to figure out the situation with no instructions. Second chapter, from intoxication to critical world-making, when reality becomes like games. There are 1.65 billion playing digital game users worldwide, which makes a $159 billion industry in 2020. Although nobody knows how many invisible players are simply pirating or borrowing licensed software. As society evolves from an industrial to informational one, play, playfulness, and games have a forming force in human lives. Even though play was for a long time considered childish, most of the digital games of today are designed by adults for adults. This change is ever more accelerated by digital technologies that superimpose the virtual designs on physical, such as augmented and virtual reality. These technologies overlay digital information, images, and video on the physical world, blending the physical and the virtual worlds together and enhancing our perception and sense of reality. A digital media theorist Alfie Baum writes about the full immersion as a form of intoxication, or you could say Huizinga's vertigo. It is now, via our phones, consoles and computers, that life is really more dreamlike than ever. Today, virtuality penetrates both physical space and online experience. The capacity to depict the world in high definition has never been greater. Game developers, as well as artists, manufacture our reality. As tools for game making are increasingly accessible to a wider range of creatives, it is essential that the virtual won't be seen as an escapist technology promoted by big game developers, but also reclaimed as a way to mobilize new political imaginary. Like it was in the online multiplayer game Animal Crossing New Horizons, where Hong Kongese protesters customized their islands and used the platform to protest during the pandemic lockdown in spring 2020. Games contain values of people who make them. However, many games still reinforce existing inequalities and appropriate marginalized communities, be it racial, gender, cultural, and class biases. The Tropes versus Women in Video Game, a project by game critic Anita Sarkeesian, is a great example of unpacking some of the systemic bias problems. The project examines the patterns and stereotypes associated with female characters in gaming. The games we play can affect our sense of self and the ways we relate to the world. For example, works of Lyndon Johnson or Larry Achiampong and David Blandy delve into the politics of race, racism, and they challenge the post-colonial issues in digital games. In our game, Poetic Machine Unlearning, the player explores a landscape revealing systemic bias As an AI engineer, you have to find and fix all the confused, biased, and stuck intelligent nodes. Slowly, more sensitivity and reflection are brought into game development. An excellent job of incorporating a character's culture history is game Never Alone. Folklore and traditions of Inupiat, those are native Alaskan people, are present throughout the game in a respectful way that enriches the player's understanding of these people and their experiences. The third chapter, fantastical proposals and embodying the kinship. Digital games are important not only because of their cultural ubiquity or their sales figures, but for what they can offer as a space for imagination and critique. These are significant not only to the game designer, but also for the artist and an indie game developer who rethinks games. For example, Lawrence Legg's fantastical simulated environment Idle, on a near future and unpacking a complex struggle between humanity and AI. In Playber City Engine's virtual environment, online visitors encounter a live stream mimicking the language of Facebook's famous live multi-layer marketing selling events, Peril Parties. Together with Jessica Dara, we perform a bidding event full of mojos, moments of joy. In a playful way, we reflect the recent transformation of free play into the gamified Playber, where your work feels like fun, while somebody else monetizes and profits with your users' data. Later, all the winning bids are sent to the charity for people in need. Digital worlds are places for subversion. Games have powerful force in constructing our imagination and desires, or else the digital dream world will fall into the hands of corporations. Digital games expand the boundaries beyond the realm of pure entertainment. They offer space for imagination and alternatives to current world order. They educate us about how to live in the midst of the multiple swirling crises, ecological climate breakdown, economic recession, and uncertainty of COVID-19 pandemic. Kojima's masterpiece, Death Stranding, reflects on the post-disaster world of life and also death after the ecological catastrophe and mass extinction. A game that invites the player to think about deep ecological time. So, digital media can bear witness to events beyond the scale of our perception and sense of time. The roles we play do not only expose our true realities, but allow us to become somebody else. The subjectivity of roleplay is therefore an important tool for navigating the perspectives of others. A multi-species tourist, Donna Haraway, offers productive new ways of reconfigure our relations to the Earth and all its inhabitants. Her vision of how human and non-human are inseparably linked could be experienced in a simulation game called Everything. There, on micro and macro levels, the player takes form of any object in the game and is able to interact with other objects, creating unique behaviors. So, Everything manifests digital games are new culture genres helping us to forge the bonds with the other, be it non-human species or deplanetary. To conclude, when Comenius reformed education, the Western world and its order were in chaos, agony, and collapse. Comparable turbulent times of the Great Depression in between the two world wars shifted Huizinga's attention towards play as a cultural phenomenon. Similarly, in the gig economy and precarious conditions of 2008 and 2020 economic crises that repeatedly put down the workforce of millennials, we play with the notion of what a virtual world can offer to players. Such a deep time of reflection and uncertainty led us to experiment with rules, break and subvert them. We are interested in this collapse, or precisely in the lack of rules when the audience takes over and invents their own ways of play. Collapse steers the ground for the new imaginaries. Through the means of role play, their transformative power allows billions of players to understand and feel empathically what is it to be the other. Apart from being motivational and educative, digital games can be a critical genre reimagining the world differently. Thank you so much for listening.